All right. Well, thank you for those of you who joined promptly at noon and were kind enough to let others join as they could. We're really excited to have you here. I am Michelle Muhammed, Managing Partner and Senior Wealth Advisor with M&M Wealth Advisory. And as some of you know, this is part of a monthly series to celebrate 25 years as a financial planner. And I'm happy today to have another very, shall we say, seasoned advisor, Ron, who I think might beat me in years of being a financial planner by a little bit. But we're really happy to have you here today to discuss guarding the gold, wealth, health, and the rules of retirement. Really, it's just going to be a conversation between the two of us about retirement and common questions and topics that clients reach out to us about, and things that you may find really helpful as you navigate whatever stage of retirement you are in or planning for. So before we go more into it, I'd love for Ron to introduce himself. I'll talk a little bit about myself again, and then we'll get to the good stuff, talk about these topics related to retirement. Ron?
Thanks, Michelle. Yep. So my name's Ron Taraborrelli. I own a practice called Synergy Wealth Management out of Marlton, New Jersey. My practice really tries to focus on, money management, financial planning, and tax strategies to try to help clients lower their lifetime tax bill. Michelle and I kind of hit it off, and we started joining forces to do these types of seminars. And just to let you know, if you like live stuff, this is live and unscripted. We do not script this. We do not even practice it, which probably makes me a little bit nervous. But yeah, it's just meant to be an open, easygoing conversation. And some of the topics we're going to talk about are those that come up the most when people are approaching retirement and in retirement. So thank you for attending, and go ahead, Michelle, I'll let you continue it.
Okay, yeah. So just to say a little bit more about myself, I'm not in New Jersey, although I did go to Seton Hall in New Jersey. Shout out to the Pirates and who have joined us. But anyway, I have clients nationwide, but I am based in Maryland. And I'm very fortunate to really focus my practice on helping clients through life's big financial transitions, of which retirement is one, as well as things like divorce, marriage, and loss of a spouse. So happy and challenging life transitions. Well, as you can tell, and from what I said earlier and what Ron said, retirement is a big life transition. You're going from a season of your life where you were accumulating, saving, 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 and now you're distributing. And so I will say that I think, and Ron, I invite you to give your 2 cents about it. I think it's a psychological shift in a most profound way, or a more profound way than people expect, because you're not just like, oh, okay, well, maybe you have been working with a financial advisor, or you just did the right things to save enough for your future, so you're financially secure. But then you have to think about, how am I going to spend not just my money, but my time? And I remember hearing at a longevity conference that people spend more time preparing for a 2-week vacation than they do preparing for a 20 to 40-year retirement. And by that, not the financial aspect of it, but even just like the day-to-day, what am I going to do with my time? What are your thoughts on that, Ron?
Yeah, I remember I was I had at one point in my life, I was went out to different hospitals and did financial planning for the employees. And once a month, I'd sit down with the CEO and have lunch. And then he actually retired, and but he would still be at the hospital a lot. And I remember him saying, I went from who's who to who's he within a very short period of time. And he was actually struggling with that because before, obviously, he would walk around the hospital, everybody knew who he was. And he definitely felt like he lost his sense of identity with just maybe 3 to 4 months into retirement. So a lot of different psychological things happen when people retire. I find that some people make the adjustment quickly. There are not that many that do that. But after 6 months and especially 1 year, most people start finding their footing and what they're going to do, how they're going to fill their day. But it does take a little bit of time to adjust to, especially I remember the financial crisis of 2008, where there was a lot of forced retirements and people really didn't get to plan as much as they would have liked to for retirement. But even those who really plan for it, it's just something hard to fully prepare for until it happens. But there are definitely things we could talk about that you can do that help you prepare for that. And one of them is, like Michelle said, how are you going to fill your day? What are you going to do? A lot of people then start to volunteer and do other things to help fill their day and their time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was talking to someone very close to me recently who was saying that she just is like what am I going to do with my days now? And I was like, well, you kind of have to create your own structure. And the key I find, and again, I haven't been through retirement, but I have helped several people through retirement and to retirement and through retirement. And I think the key is to make that structure something that doesn't become overwhelming. Because I think people go from empty days to days where they're overcommitted, right? They have committed to all these different committees and boards and different things like that. And then it's like, well, when do you have time for yourself to actually just relax? Because relaxation is good. Everything's good in moderation. So I think that's an excellent point, Ron. Volunteering, doing things that are meaningful to you with people who are meaningful to you. That's really important. And there's also nothing wrong with, um, you know, if it's not a volunteer position, a part-time job that you really enjoy. So I have some of whom are on this call, clients who are personal trainers, like, just do a few hours a week doing that, or, maybe their passion is cycling. So, they cycle or different things like that. So it's really all about crafting a life that's very full and meaningful for yourself. And it actually brings up something that I don't know. Do you ever get this happen? I have this happen all the time, Ron, where people will call me or they want to talk to me because they're like, I have this trip, this trip for my family. Like we're going to take the whole family to wherever, India,
Mhm.
China, Italy, where their roots are, where their great, their ancestors are from. I know you're a proud Italian American, so this might resonate with you. And they're like, but that's going to cost, you know, a chunk of change, right? To take the whole family.
Yeah.
And I'm just feeling really nervous. We're feeling really nervous about that, Michelle. Can we do it? The beauty of a financial plan and like doing annual reviews and things like that is that your advisor can really answer that question if when you call, because we know your situation and so on. We can answer it honestly, whether you can or you can't, or maybe you can and not at the scale that you were thinking of. But a lot of times I'm finding that I already know when they ask the question what the answer is. And a lot of times it is, you can do this. You've got the money. Spend it, like spend it wisely. What about you, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had clients. One fellow went to go see his whole family in Austria, and he delayed retirement. He was getting old, and he was saying, "Look, I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to continue to do this." He's about 12 years in the retirement, and he still goes every year to Europe and that area of the world. So not only was he able to do it once, we were able to get him to do it with him and his two sons. So not too many people. And now the sons are very well off and they're paying for themselves to go. But it was something that, when we did the planning, I said, sure, it looks like you can go. It's not going to be a problem. Long term, it won't, throw you off track. And, not only was he able to go once, like I said, he's been doing it every year. So that's great to see. Yeah, so planning things out, like you said, and thinking of like a bucket list maybe before you retire is a good idea. To maybe that's one of the things you put in your bucket list. And then it doesn't have to be all at once either. Plenty of people, are full time, they go part time. A lot of employers today don't want to lose your knowledge. They're willing to work with you to keep you on for just a few days a week. So, you don't have to nowadays think of retirement as an end, then you stop working completely. A lot of people still like to keep their connections at work, and maybe they're on LinkedIn. I have a lot of clients that retired and they do freelance because they're maybe in technology or something that's in demand, and they're like, hey, you know what, I don't actually need income anymore. I'm making more money in retirement. They don't have the benefits, of course, but they want to make more money in the first few years of retirement than they were when they were working, which is kind of funny. And then it's funny, like we have the conversation, but you wanted to retire, you created that bucket list and now you're not doing them because you're working. So you got to strike that balance. But the point here is that, anything can happen and you don't have to basically cut the cord all at once. You can phase retirement, which isn't a bad idea. I find a lot of people that do a phased retirement, it's very helpful to them in the planning, and just psychologically helps them prepare to be fully retired. So yeah, that's one of the things people can do today because it's very convenient. Even if you want to move to an area, you can do remote today. So a lot of ways to do it and go about it.
Awesome. I think those are really, really great points that there's no one size fits all. I've seen everything from like my own mom doing oncology work, in retirement, not for the money, but for the reward, to, clients really going in with gusto to scholarship committees for their sororities, fraternities, and, other things, or traveling with family. At least one person on here travels with their family periodically on different cruises and things. So I think, those are all great things. I mean, in line with that, slightly different, but it's still, the same essence of it, is people looking at, wait a minute, I've got a pension, or I've saved more than I can spend, in my lifetime, even if I live to 95, 100, 105, whatever. Should I give some of this away now, whether it's to family, charity, whatnot? So before I give my 2 cents, Ron, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you get that question?
Yeah, well, I see people who are reluctant to give it away for good reasons because life can get expensive really quick. We've been in a high inflationary period for a while. And, so sometimes when you retire, you don't know the market you're going to retire into. You don't know the inflation period. But I also see where people are living very long and they're reaching into their late 90s and they have a lot of wealth. And I get to talk to the children, and people had kids at a lot younger ages, so some of their children are in their late 70s and some even early 80s, and they're like, look, what am I going to do with the money now? It's just like, hey, I'm 80 myself, and my parents are in good shape and I'm not as in great shape. So if you're experiencing this market like we had the last 10 years, you were lucky if you retired 10 years ago. Although we've had some high inflation, the S&Ps also did 15%. Now, most retirees aren't doing that because you wouldn't be 100% stock, but still you've had really good returns. Maybe you tried to stick to the 4% withdrawal rate, and we could talk about what that is. But if you did, your portfolio would have been providing you more income if you wanted it to, and sustainable income, than just the 4% withdrawal rate. So The question is, do you want to start giving and gifting and create a gifting strategy for your heirs, children, whoever it may be, charity now while you're still alive? And there are a few benefits to that. One, you get to see them actually enjoy the money, how they're going to use the money, um, and just get it out of your estate. Most people today do not have an estate tax problem, but it still reduces the taxable estate if you're in that situation. So some benefits of giving it away a little bit early, but again, you do want to be cautious. We want to make sure you have enough money to last you your lifetime and have all your expenses covered for your lifetime.
Absolutely. So, again, for me, always goes back to the financial plan, because we do the analysis and sometimes stress test for different things, higher inflation and living longer. Believe it or not, that's one of the biggest risks to your retirement. The longer you live, the more money you need to have, right? And with healthcare costs and things of that nature. So every good plan, you've got to evaluate those things. That being said, I agree with you that I've had clients who've said to me, like, I kind of do want to actually see my money at work. In other words, they don't want to just leave it till after they die, right? And not be able to see whether it's their loved ones, whether they help out with a purchase of a home, like a down payment, whether they donate to a charity that they feel is doing good work, at a time where some charities have lost some funding and things like that. Whether it is, this is a big one, whether it's a niece, nephew, or a grandchild, helping with tuition or something like that, or if there's a special needs person in your life helping with that. So there are just so many different ways. Sometimes I get questions like, okay, well, so and so in my family has debt and I'm thinking of helping them out. And I always try to say, okay, that's something that I'm not a personal fan of, paying off someone's debt. I would say, can you find another way to support them in a difficult time? Could it be that you pay for their kids' daycare, your grandchild or niece or nephew's daycare, and they can focus on paying off their debt? Unless the debt is medical debt or something that was beyond their control, I would say, I've told clients before, I would not encourage you to endorse or encourage bad financial habits. And of course, I'm a financial planner, so I'm probably biased on that front, but it's, I think, more rewarding to do something that they have to pay for anyway, and you can actually see that at work than really paying off a bill, which may just get regenerated because the core problem of their spending has not been addressed. So I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but it's just showing how there are creative ways that you can, with your excess money, if you have enough, if you've sat down with your advisor, whether Ron, myself, or someone else, and looked at things and said, okay, these are some things that would bring me joy, and also have meaning. Would you add anything to that, Ron, before we move to the next
Well,
thing?
so the only thing is, I had a thought from a tax standpoint. You can give $19,000 away in 2006 if you're a married couple. You could just double that to anyone, really. It doesn't have to be family. But there are certain things, and I see clients who really want to pay for, let's say, their grandkids' college education, and they give the check to the parents, which is then a gift, and then the parents turn around and pay the college. If you actually pay for the college expenses directly, so you write the check directly to the college, it doesn't count against your gift exclusion of the $19,000. So it's not sometimes only giving the gift, maybe the way you gift and going about it. And when you talk to us, you may think I'm just going to give money and pay for my grandson's college. I know I have the money, so why even talk to Ron or Michelle? But sometimes, hey, you talk to us and we say, hey, how are you going to do that? And you say, oh, I was going to just give my son or daughter a check. And we say, no, it's actually much better just to pay to college directly or something like that. So there's even with like things like gifting and something that may seem so simple, talking to us, we may have a better way to do it for you guys to do it.
That's a that's an excellent point. I mean, and a wonderful point. And I would add to that, like if it's a charity, for example, that you're giving to, let's say you're in the habit of giving to certain organizations or your house of worship or whatnot, and you're of an age where you have required minimum distributions, you can do something called qualified charitable distributions, where that money doesn't actually ever come to you. It goes directly to the charity. I think the limit is what, $100,000 that you can do for a
It's
QCD.
slightly more than they just raised it, so it's maybe close to 110 now.
Okay,
So it's been increased. And the important thing, just some disclaimers, right? You have to be 70 and a half. Okay,
that's
so
correct.
you have to be over not the year you turn 70 and a half. I find some confusion with this because the required minimum distribution from retirement accounts used to be 70 and a half, and that counts for your RMD, whether you take it out in January or December. But for these qualified distributions, you have to be past the age of 70 and a half. So if you're born in, like December 31st, it's a little bit tough to get it in that first, we're not born December 31st. If you're 70 and a half on December 31st, rather, it's a little tough to get that first one in the first year. But that's an excellent way. Instead of writing a check to charity through your checking account, if you don't need all of the money in your IRA or to do some future planning around taxes and the required minimum distribution, to use your IRA as a direct distribution through a QCD. It's a great way to save in taxes and currently and in future taxes, really.
Yeah. Another one is like, again, this is charitably focused, but another one is if you have non-retirement assets where you have what's called low basis. In other words, like you bought it for $5 a share, or you invested $5, with me or Ron, and now that's $100. I'm going crazy here. So this is just a random example. And so that's $95 of gain, okay, that you would pay taxes on, and just multiply that out, by 1,000 or more. And you can see that could get a little painful, right? But if you're giving it to a charity, something that's got that kind of low basis, there are no taxes to be paid on that. And you can also do things like there's no wash sale rule, which is like a way of skirting the issue. There's no wash sale rule if you give that low basis stock or investment to a charity and then buy it back with cash that you have. There's nothing precluding you from doing that. So these are lots of different things. We're not expecting you all to memorize these, but what we're showing is that these are the types of conversations we can have if you start the conversation, because we don't know when you're going through something, or if you become passionate about a particular cause or person or something that you would like to do that's meaningful to you. Talk it over with your financial advisor, because they can help you and vet the process that you're thinking of, as well as suggest some others. Anything else that you would add to that, Ron, before we invite some questions?
Just the importance of like mechanics. And I've had clients that say, oh, yeah, I gave the stock to charity, but they actually sold the stock, turned around and gave it to charity. That's not how it
Great point.
works. It's very
Mhm.
important that you transfer the shares. You never
Yes.
technically make the sale. So these
Yes.
little things, these like little mistakes that cost thousands, depend hundreds of thousands of dollars. Um, working with us, we could help you avoid that and just walk you through even the mechanics of doing it or help you with it. So just a side note there.
That's an excellent point. um, Fantastic. Okay, so just want to pause here to invite any of you, if you have questions, please, put them in the chat so that we can respond to them. Also, if you do want to be either on camera or just have your, voice heard. We can arrange for that. You may have to bear with my lack of technical abilities in that respect. But, if you really want to have your moments in the limelight, we're happy to accommodate or at least try to. Okay. So it looks like one of the questions is a question that I get all the time, and it's about when should I start collecting Social Security? So, Ron, I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Yeah, when, we used to have, so I used to have anyway, Michelle, you might have the same software. It is a very sophisticated Social Security software. And there were a lot of decisions to make and a lot of different techniques that you could do. They were, legislation has basically took those different scenarios away that you could do or different planning strategies, so security strategies. So mainly it's either like collect now or collect later, right? So for every year you delay Social Security, it's about an 8% increase in your lifetime payment. That's also adjusted, has a cost of living adjustment. So a very good benefit to delay. Now, if you're going to delay till 70, it's going to take you 82 to 84 to break even. In other words, to make up those missed payments, it takes 12 to possibly 14 years. But there is still some planning opportunities. I recently had a client who turned called your full retirement age. For most people now, it's going to be age 67. Possibly some people, it's still 66 in so many months. But this person, hadn't worked for a while, but their spouse was still working. Their spouse is slightly younger. And they said, well, I'm just going to delay because I'll get more at 70. But when we looked at it, their spouse is what they call the primary insurance amount. And that's the amount that you collect at your full retirement age. Their spouse's primary insurance amount was more than half. So half of their primary insurance amount for their spouse was more than that client's whole Social Security. So I said, well, you're really delaying for no reason. You're leaving money on the table. You should collect now at your full retirement age. And then when your spouse collects in a couple of years, because they were a couple of years younger, you'll get half of what they collect. So there are still opportunities to plan around Social Security. I'm a proponent of, if you do have a long life expectancy, if your parents lived a long time and you know their health and you're a healthy individual, most likely delaying to age 70 and pulling more assets out of your IRA. Don't forget also Social Security as of right now can possibly come back to you 50% tax free, but for most people, it's 15% of your Social Security comes back tax free because 85% of it goes into your taxable calculations. So a lot of good reasons to go ahead and delay. But remember, it does, if you need the money, collect it because you need it. But if you are healthy and you have a long life expectancy, we can use your assets and then later on in life withdraw less from your assets because Social Security makes up more of the income that you need.
Absolutely. This is a rather extreme story, but it's important because it's refers back to or harkens back to what you were saying about people don't know what they don't know. I had someone come in to see me, years ago who was not a client. She was terminally ill and she was single. She had an adult son and she had not started taking her Social Security. She was over 62 because she wanted to save it for her son. That's really not possible. I mean, he can get the, what is it, $255 death benefit. Only a spouse can claim your Social Security as their own, if it's higher than yours. And this was one of those extreme cases where I said, start your Social Security. You are terminally ill. If you do not start it, it will never get started, right? And obviously, I hope and pray that everyone on this call or anyone watching, is not in that situation. But it is the opposite of what Ron gave you an example of long life. So there's some situations where we will tell you, take it. If your life expectancy is shortened, and when I say shortened, you just don't think you're gonna die soon, but like there's some real reasons to do that. There's a need. Um, and those are the types of things that we look at. Like you have a great need or your life expectancy has been shortened. Generally speaking, we can say wait until later, especially with longevity and people living longer and longer. But there are always exceptions, and you do not know what you don't know. So just wanted to bring that point up. I will also say that we get this question a lot now in the context of FAIR. And like, oh, Social Security is going to go away. Social Security is not going to exist. And while I do understand the FAIR. And I have young people who are planning on no Social Security. And it's like, you know what? If you save enough that it doesn't matter if there's no Social Security, I'm not going to be mad at you because that's just more money, right? But that being said, for most people who are approaching retirement, in retirement, it's going to be there. Is there going to be that 25% cut that, is written into law if there are not some changes that are made? I don't know. Okay. But that being said, when people make decisions to start Social Security early and have reductions and possibly penalties if they continue to work, out of FAIR, I think FAIR is one of the worst ways to make decisions. And while I cannot make you, make a decision that's in your best interest, I can give you the information, and Ron can give you the information so you can make an informed decision. But I guess the headline of this is do not act out of fear, act out of information, education, customized to your situation. Anything you would add to that, Ron, before we move
No,
on
just,
to?
and one thing I think you're alluding, we can model this into your financial plan, collecting early. We could actually show you, what happens if you collect early, what happens if you collect later. And if you're still working, and you're making too much and you collect before your primary insurance amount, or your full Social Security date, you do start paying Social Security back. So we can model all these things into the plan and give you more of a personalized, that's why we call it personalized financial planning, personalized answer to you. So the answer is going to be different of when to collect Social Security, depend on your specific circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, great, great point. I just put in the chat that, if you have any questions, feel free to put them as you like. All right. So other things that I feel like it's like the hot topic, or I don't know, like maybe people have a fear of missing out, FOMO. Roth conversions. I would say I get those questions all the time. So Ron, what are your thoughts on Roth conversion? People are like, oh, I want to do a Roth conversion. So what are the things that you discuss with them when they come in and say?
Yeah. So, sometimes I get that question and somebody's literally in their mid to late 80s. And I tell them there's a break-even calculation, but normally the earliest is maybe 8 years. You got to get pretty lucky on that to get the 8 years. But on the short end, you would break even because remember, you're paying taxes today on that money and you have to make that up over time. And that can take probably on the longer end around 12 years. So anywhere from 8 to 12 years. So if you're kind of in your mid 80s, just think about that. You would be 90 some odd years old before it pays off. And unless you want to pay taxes for your children or grandchildren or whoever else, it's probably not going to make sense. But there is this sort of tax holiday, which is normally the perfect opportunity to do Roth conversions. And that's where, you go from working and now you're no longer working. Maybe you're delaying Social Security, so you're 65, but you're not collecting. And you can literally be, if you just live off of like savings accounts, in it pretty much a 0% tax bracket or close to it. And that sounds great, but it's probably not, especially if you have a significant amount in tax deferred, like 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, traditional IRAs, because they remember you will have most likely a requirement distribution either at 73 or 75, and that count can grow to be so large that your required minimum locks you into a higher tax bracket for the rest of your life. So there's some planning opportunities to do Roth conversions, and we can sort of pick a reasonable tax rate. I mean, you have a lot of flexibility on how much taxes you pay and the way you're going to pay. There's something called IRMA that we'll talk about when we get into healthcare a little bit, but we can do it so it doesn't affect your healthcare premiums in the future, or sometimes you may want to go over that. But anyway, we can plan around these Roth conversions and these strategies. And usually that first full year of retirement is a perfect time to take a real serious look at Roth conversions.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of times people hear about Roth conversions and don't, at least in my experience, don't fully understand the implications. Like, are you okay with paying taxes now? Because if you're not, it's a very short conversation. We really don't need to talk that much, you know. Not everyone realizes when they come to me to ask that question that they would have to pay the taxes now. They're just thinking about tax-free income later. Another thing is really, like you said, um, I when you're looking at the break even and so on, for some people it makes sense even if they're not going to make the break even, because their goal is not for themselves, it's for the next generation. They know, they go in with their eyes wide open, you know, with the information we provide, knowing that this is probably more beneficial to their heirs than it is to them. And so that is a real consideration, the why behind the Roth conversion, because it's not always going to work out for you. Now, of course, there, you know, as Ron indicated, there are some reasons in terms of being able to reduce your required minimum distributions and thus possibly the Medicare taxes and or premiums that can be elevated because of that. But at the end of the day, it all breaks down to one size does not fit all. We customize our advice to your situation and your goals, and what's important to you. It's very, very important. So next time you hear about a Roth conversion, ask your financial advisor. We're happy to answer and customize the advice, because it's not just what your friends you know and family might be talking about, like, oh, you should definitely do this. If you get the tax bill, you want to know the tax bill is coming. It's not you know, something that you want to be like, oh, I did not plan for this. The other thing, you know, and it just escaped me, but I'll come back to it later. All right. Any questions? Actually, why don't we talk about Irma, Ron? And for everyone out there who hasn't heard about Irma, we're not talking about a hurricane. We're not talking, you know, about you know, your grandma or or sister. We are talking about elevated or increased Medicare premiums as a result of, you know, distributions and so on. So why don't you, Ron, with your tax hat, why don't you talk a little bit about it? Try to make it as simple as possible, which is something of a complex situation. So I'm giving you a good challenge.
I know. Well, so I think most people realize when you collect Medicare Part B, you have to pay into that. Right now, it's around $203 per person. So, you know, for a married couple, they each pay. And whether you pay the minimum is pretty much around that 203, or whether you pay the increase in premium, which the next step from 203, you go pretty close to $300 if your income goes over a certain level. They decide that 2 years prior. So right now, if you were to retire in 2026 and you were 65 in 2028, this year's income affects your 2028 premium. So there's a 2 year basically look back. And the important thing for people to remember is, especially if you go, a lot of people are making a lot of money before retirement, or when they retirement, let's say you got stock options that pay out and maybe sick time paid out that still exists where people get that and they get the payout. But you get this big lump sum and it puts you into a higher tax bracket, and then your IRMA is going to go up more than it should, because then your income is going to be really low once you retire. You can file an appeals, and I've never seen that's one of the reasons to appeal your Medicare premium, and the amount of it is because of retirement. So I've had every client do it that's retired whose income has dropped significantly, and every one of them have gotten their premiums lower due to retirement. So it's very important that if you have a year where your income is a lot more than expected due to certain circumstances, you can file an appeal. The biggest one, again, is retirement. So again, when we're planning around things, and I've had clients make huge mistakes, and not clients, but prospects call me after the fact, which unfortunately with this kind of stuff, there's not much we're going to do after the fact, where they either converted too much, or they did something that made their income go way over, and now they're stuck paying that IRMA higher premium. So just to let you know, the top end of the premium is close to $800 a month for each of you. So, but again, that you would have to be for a married couple filing jointly above 750,000. But it does continue to go up. It is a scale. The minimum you're going to pay, no matter what you make, is around $203 per month.
Thanks, Ron. And I think the theme of this whole conversation, but particularly these types of crucial topics, is communication. If you communicate with your financial advisor, it can help prevent or reduce some of these big issues. I will tell you again, fear often results in bad things. So I've seen people who, fortunately, not my clients, who've taken money out of their retirement accounts due to fear of the market, right? And just distributed them, and then ended up bumping up their taxable income. And it's like, no. That's not a great thing to do. Or maybe they did a Roth conversion or something like that because it was the thing to do, but didn't look at the implications of like how that bumped them up in taxable income and things of that nature. There's also the fact that, your spending strategy, your income strategy in retirement, it matters, right? So as Ron said, there are reasons where you might want to spend down cash first. There are other times where you don't want to do that, but like sometimes you might want to spend down cash first, or non-retirement assets first. And that allows you to do some Roth conversions because you're still in a very low tax bracket. On the other hand, there are times where I've seen people who actually do start distributing their IRAs, earlier, and start using those because they're trying to bring that pre-tax number down, so that they don't end up with huge required minimum distributions later on that they're not willing to give, hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity, every year, which, as we talked about earlier, you can't even get a qualified charitable deduction above the 110,000 or so. Okay. Income strategy. Wow, I can't believe this time is like flying by, Ron. You must just be so captivating that, like, I don't even realize it. Let me just do a check for the chat. Okay, so we have a question actually that is about income strategy, and like, how do I know what to take out when and from where? That's basically what the question's asking. So, Ron,
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's one that involves planning. And sometimes every year I change where my clients take their money out of. So if we just back up and say this so-called safe withdrawal rate is about 4%, right? So $1 million, you take out 40,000 your first year, you adjust that for inflation. A very imperfect science in a sense. It's a good starting point. I usually tell people if you're planning to retire, let's start with that 4% because it has proven that your money should last 30 years. Very little probability of running out for, again, inflation adjusted after 30 years. But again, look at this last 15 years where we've had better than expected returns from the portfolios, and you could have spent more. So I think if you're going to have a portfolio where it's called a total return approach, where we build your portfolio, we pick a withdrawal rate, um, and you're experiencing what you experienced in the last 10 years, I've been telling people, look, if you want to take out more, you can. So the point here is to be flexible. If you, unfortunately, retired in like the year 2000, you really should have stuck with that 4% withdrawal rate because we had 3 years of a down market. And then as far as where, so when I have those clients that were in that scenario I spoke of earlier, where they have different, let's call them buckets of money. You have your traditional or taxable account, your Roth, and then you have sort of your either taxable brokerage account or your savings account. And where do we pull from? And sometimes it's from multiple sources, to tell you the truth, but from a tax standpoint, if you're in a very low tax bracket, I tell clients either let's pull money out of your IRA now up until a certain point, depending on the income you need. And then if it's going to put us into a higher bracket or affect your IRMA, we might be able to take from the savings account. So if you're not going to pull from the IRA, then that's when I suggest let's do Roth conversion. So it's really going to depend what's more important to you, trying to save taxes really now or in the future. But the point is, many people make the mistake because of the conventional wisdom of you should pull out of your taxable money first. Again, that's getting people into trouble later in life where they have a higher IRMA, they're locked into a higher tax bracket. So depending on, if you have a pension or no pension or anything like that, um, we have to look at it. And, I have clients right now pulling a certain amount of IRA. They decided not to do the Roth conversion, and their taxable money is growing. And remember, with your taxable money, the way it stands right now, that if you pass, you get a step up in basis. So the taxable money and the Roth, which comes out tax free, is a much more valuable benefit to the heirs because they will essentially get it tax free. So, and it really, again, none of these answers that I ever give are, it's all going to be personal to you. We really got to sit down with our clients and figure out what you're trying to do long term, what your preferences are, and then come up with that personalized plan for taking money out. One other thing I'll mention is, my personal belief is people, and this is a lot of studies, we're under what's called pensionized here in America. So if you are more conservative and you just want a steady amount of income to come in, not tied to the market, I like it. They're called immediate lifetime income annuities. You could put like $1 million in right now. The payouts are, I haven't seen these payouts literally since the late 1990s. You're getting close to $70,000 a year for a married couple age 65 on a lifetime income annuity. So, that's something to consider. You don't want too much money in that because there's lack of liquidities and there's all these pros and cons that come with it. But my clients that seem to have the sort of the best lifestyle because they don't worry about where their income's coming from, they don't worry about the markets, is a little bit they have some form of income either coming in as a pension or they pensionized some of their accumulation.
Yeah, so I think we're starting to sound a little bit like broken records, but because it's the truth, we customize the advice to you. And I think this is important, just not like tooting our horns, but really more importantly to say that when you talk to your friends, your family, and they're like, oh, this is the next great thing, like you have to invest in SpaceX, that's going to be the solution to everything, or whatever the case may be. There's no silver bullet that I'm aware of. And even when you do, maybe you bought Apple or Microsoft early or whatever the case may be, or you were part of a startup and had a lot of money. It's then what you do with the money and how you execute on those things. And so essentially, a lot of these the answers to your questions have been like, it depends. It depends on you, your goals, who's important to you, what's important to you, your time frame, which can overlap with your longevity, all these different things. So, for example, I have some clients, it would not be at all appropriate for them to get an income annuity because they've got a pension or they've got more money than they need, and they're really and they're not, maybe I had to talk them down from how aggressive they were.
I've talked more people out of them for annuities than into
Right,
them.
right.
So yeah,
But
that's a good point. Yeah. So I mean, I've
it's
literally had
it's
people with
both.
$10 million that spend 150,000 a year, and I
Right.
told them the probability of going broke is next to zero. Um, for that. So, and then yeah, the important too, all our financial planning software, by the way, assumes that you're not making any mistakes in the money management. It's in there. It's the assumption that you're on maybe either what's called a glide path where you're stepping down the risk in your portfolio leading up to retirement. Um, so it's very important, Michelle, you alluded to that, like if you're having these highly concentrated positions where you have too much of your money in a stock or you're overweight stock. I've seen this leading up to 2008 when I was doing, some consulting out at the colleges and the hospitals I went to, where, people didn't want to sell. They say, well, I'm making so much money, the market's so good. And I was like, yeah, but you plan to retire in like less than 5 years, and you cannot, you don't want to sort of roll the dice with your retirement. You want to start protecting that money. And as bad as 2008 was, which it was, extremely bad, second to the Great Depression, those who got more conservative were able to retire. Their portfolios lost, but nowhere near as much as those who were over concentrated in sectors or just stocks. And it wasn't. They had to be careful in the beginning of retirement, but they didn't delay their retirement. Those who stayed too aggressive in their portfolio and their allocation, who had highly concentrated positions, unfortunately they had to delay their retirement.
And I just to give some context, because I think we were both with Fidelity at that point in time. I just to give context, Ron's not saying that you have to go to being completely conservative. What Ron's indicating is that diversification is more conservative than being concentrated in one or a few stocks. So it's really right sizing your level of risk and what allocation is appropriate. Because I would say one of the top questions I get, well, okay, I'm retiring now, so we need to get much more conservative. Not necessarily. I mean, it really depends on the whole situation. I'm in Maryland, the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, lots of people with military, federal, state, and federal pensions. And may not, have the same needs for their portfolio, the money from their portfolio as others. Although all across our nation, we have wonderful people who served the country and their counties and states in different ways. We have police officers and all different types of people who have pensions still, right? But again, one size doesn't fit all. If someone tells you that the perfect portfolio for you because you are a specific age or the certain percentage of stocks or bonds for your particular age is X. Well, they're giving you blanket advice. And you know what they say about free advice, so I would just caution everyone. You're special enough and you're important enough that you deserve customized advice and you deserve to make informed decisions as opposed to, oh, Susie Q said do this, or Aunt Irma said do that, that type of thing. Anyway, I promise you, I do not have anything against women named Irma. So we're at 1:00. I want to respect everyone's time. Let's just see, are there any questions that anyone's asked? I don't know if I'm missing anything. Ron, Stefan. Okay, looks like we're in good shape. Thank you all for attending. It's really been a pleasure. Great questions. Ron, as always, I enjoy talking with you.
For having me on.
Yeah, and then I guess I would just say that we'll have some information when we send this out on how to reach out to either one of us. But of course, several of you have worked with us before. If you have a question specific to your situation, please reach out to us directly. We appreciate the opportunity to serve you, to work with you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining. Take care.